Batman and Robin by Michael Jan Friedman. Chapter 2. Before Freeze could move a muscle, Batman hit the ice-covered brontosaurus and came sliding down its neck. Plowing into the villain feet first, the Dark Knight dislodged the diamond from his grasp and sent it skittering across the frozen floor. Clenching his teeth, Freeze turned his cryonic weapon on his adversary. "Bat on ice, anyone?" Abruptly, Batman kicked the cryogun out of Freeze's hands and snatched it out of the air. "Didn't your mother ever tell you not to play with guns?" Moving quickly, Freeze launched a kick of his own and sent the gun pinwheeling out of Batman's possession. Then he snatched it in turn. "You're not sending me to the cooler." Before Batman could respond, Freeze fired, but his enemy dodged the blast. Undaunted, Freeze took aim again. That's when the front doors of the museum blew open, admitting Gotham's other costumed crime fighter. Robin came soaring through the air on his motorbike, a grin on his face as if there were nothing in the world he'd rather be doing than risking his life. Freeze was so distracted by the entrance he didn't see Batman kick at his gun again. He just felt the impact and saw the weapon ascend in a high, twirling arc. At first, Freeze thought it was headed for Robin's hand, but Batman's protege didn't catch it. Sailing over Freeze's head on his bike, he kicked the airborne gun onto the altar atop the pyramid. "Score!" Robin laughed. "And the crowd goes wild!" Then he landed, laying his bike sideways in a long, slippery slide across the floor. To keep from slamming into the wall, Robin grabbed a Roman statue of Mercury and used it to whip around in a dismount. Batman went for Freeze. Robin was right behind him. How dramatic, thought Freeze. How inspiring. His own outlook tended to be more down-to-earth, more succinct. "Grab the gem," he told his Icemen. "Kill the heroes!" Until now, his hirelings had been holding back, awaiting his orders. Now they rushed forward, hockey masks in place, sticks flailing as they closed with the caped intruders. "It's the hockey team from hell!" Robin wisecracked. He didn't know how right he was, Freeze mused, as he raced toward the altar and his fallen gun. But he never quite got there. There was a rush of dark security uniforms from a side door Freeze hadn't paid much attention to, and before he could reach the top of the pyramid, they were swarming all over him. It turned out to be a mistake, a big mistake, but not for Freeze. After all, he was their superior in every way, a living weapon designed to survive, to endure, to win, while they were donut-chomping nobodies off the streets of Gotham. With speed and precision, he began wailing on the guards. Hooks, jabs, upper and lower cuts, all perfectly delivered, if he did say so himself. And the inevitable result? He looked at the uniformed figures sprawled all around him. Not a single one was still conscious. "Cop sui," he spat. Then he remembered his gun, still atop the altar. Showing the Rent-A-Cops the disdain they deserved, he turned his back on them and went for it. Batman blocked a swinging stick with his left hand, then kicked the offending Iceman in the ribs. Sensing danger from behind, he ducked and allowed a second Iceman to sail over his back. Then he punched the first one, sending him sprawling across the room. A glance told him Robin was holding his own as well, but they weren't getting any closer to the giant gem the Icemen were defending. Glancing at Freeze, Batman saw the villain ascending the pyramid, a string of guards littering the floor at its base. Clearly, the villain had to be the priority now. Touching a stud on his belt, he popped a pair of skates out of the soles of his boots, took a couple of running steps to get up some momentum, and wove an intricate path through the Icemen. En route, he bowled one over and grabbed his stick. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw that Robin had done the same. Together they raced across the room on narrow steel blades, momentarily free of Freeze's henchmen, and headed for the pyramid. But by then, Freeze had made it to his gun. Grasping it, he turned and fired, creating an ice bridge to the floor. "Caution!" he said, his voice devoid of inflection, and all the more sinister for it. "Bridge may ice over." And with that, he slid down the ice bridge to the floor below. Then he began sprinting toward his giant drilling truck. Batman had to make a choice, and quickly. Freeze, or the gem. He clapped Robin on the shoulder. "You get the ice, I'll get the Iceman." "Gotcha," said Robin. Batman didn't watch him make his way back through the maze of thugs. There was no time, but he did hear a series of grunts and curses that told him Robin was doing his job. Now it was time for Batman to do his. As Freeze raced for his truck, the Dark Knight was closing fast. Fast enough, perhaps, to prevent a clean getaway. Certainly, Freeze seemed to think so, because he spun around in mid-run and fired his cryogun. Batman ducked, using his cape as an ice shield, and managed to deflect the beam toward one of the Icemen. The thug froze in his tracks. Seeking cover, Freeze disappeared behind the giant brontosaurus. At the same time, Robin skated into line with Batman, both of them heading in the same direction. With undisguised pride, the boy showed his mentor the diamond. "I got mine. Where's yours?" Suddenly, the powerful-looking legs of the brontosaurus crusted over with a thick coat of ice. "What killed the dinosaurs?" bellowed Freeze, poking his head out from behind the brontosaurus. "Why, the Ice Age, of course!" Then Freeze shoved the beast with all his strength, causing the mighty creature to topple forward. As it hit the floor, it exploded in front of Batman and Robin. "He's definitely extinct," Robin pointed out, always the master of the painfully obvious. He and Batman managed to elude the debris, but had to veer off from their objective to do so. Unfortunately, it allowed the Icemen to catch up with them, and one of the henchmen took the opportunity to slash at Robin's hand. Again, the gem went tumbling free. Another Iceman hit it with his stick. The diamond changed direction and went flying toward a landing near the museum doors. By that time, Freeze had made it to his truck. He was climbing forward to get to the hatch, and the Icemen had encircled the crime fighters, cutting them off from both the villain and the diamond. Batman saw one chance. He skated straight at the thugs, pulling a flagpole from a display and wrote, as if he were planning to engage them in a joust. Picking up on his intent, Robin plucked a flagpole as well. But at the last second, just as the Icemen braced themselves for the crime fighters' assault, Batman and Robin drove their poles into the ice-covered floor and vaulted over the Icemen's heads. As the thugs watched helplessly, the masked men flew through the air in the direction of the landing and the waiting gem. Before they could get there, Freeze yelled, "Hit me!" Batman came to roost on the landing, mere inches from the gem, Robin right behind him. But an Iceman skated in from the wings, and with a slap shot, sent the flying diamond across the room, right into Freeze's waiting glove. Batman saw the villain's fingers close over the gem, securing it. "Thanks for playing," Freeze crowed. Then he dropped into the cockpit of his giant drilling truck and began to slide the hatch closed above him. Batman turned to his protege. "Work on the thugs. I'll take care of Freeze." Before the words were out of his mouth, he saw a capsule rise out of the drill truck on some kind of ejection cylinder. He had to move quickly. Leaping onto a banister that ran beside the landing, Batman retracted his skates. Then he slid down the rail on the soles of his boots and jumped when he got to the bottom. For a heartbeat, he sailed through the air. Then he dropped into the cockpit. A fraction of a second later, the hatch closed over it. Inside the capsule, Freeze was starting to feel the rush of victory. Making his way to his control console, he started to hit a button when something dark and leathery caught his eye. He whirled and saw Batman standing there. Of course, the fellow was nothing if not tenacious. "Freeze," said the crime fighter. Freeze smiled. "Nice of you to drop in." Then he hit the button. A tremendous roar went up, and the capsule, set on the end of its ejection cylinder, blasted out of the drill truck. It rose like a rocket toward the roof. Batman was thrown to the floor by the powerful acceleration, but Freeze remained upright, protected by his mighty suit. "Pity the poor bat," he said. "How weak you are." As he made the comment, he saw something flash by one of his observation ports. A black and red blur that looked disgustingly like Batman's sidekick. And judging by the gloved fingers he saw clinging to the raised edge of the port, that was exactly who it was. But he wouldn't be able to hang on long, Freeze was certain of that. As if to underline his thought, the capsule blew through the ceiling at an angle, then blasted its way through the museum roof. They were suddenly surrounded by the starry night sky as the rocket continued to climb. But Robin was still clinging to the side of the rocket for dear life. Freeze grunted thoughtfully. Perhaps the junior crime fighter's demise would take longer than he'd imagined. Batman glared at his adversary as he got to his feet. "You were a great scientist once, Freeze. A great man. Don't waste your genius on evil. Freeze looked at him. I hate being lectured. Then he shoved Batman into the bulkhead with bone-jarring force, and before his enemy could recover, the villain brought his cryo-gun to bear. Pressing the trigger, he froze Batman's ankles and wrists to the bulkhead in chunks of dense, unbreakable ice. Batman cursed himself inwardly. He had allowed Freeze to get the drop on him, and in a game like this one, it was difficult to come back from an early deficit. If I were you, I would watch the numbers, Freeze told him. He tapped his silver-gloved finger on the transparent face of the altimeter. They are the harbingers of your doom. Batman glanced at the altimeter. Their capsule was at 10,000 feet and climbing steadily. Can you feel it coming? Freeze asked him, his voice as clinical as a scalpel, his eyes glazed with intellectual curiosity. The embrace of the void? The icy cold of space? Can you feel it coming? Batman didn't answer. He was thinking. There was a way out of this, if only he could find it. To freeze to death? What blissful agony! At 10,000 feet, a small quiver, a tiny quake. The body resists, thus far unaware that its fate is sealed. Still, Batman refused to answer. In his mind, he was entertaining strategy after strategy and rejecting them just as quickly. At 20,000 feet, the heavy hand of cold wraps you in a blanket. It shows your blood, chills your lungs, and then at 30,000 feet, what welcome relief. An end to rage, to pain, as your heart turns to ice and beats no more. Another glance at the altimeter showed Batman they'd reached 15,000 feet and still rising. In such a way, I was frozen once. In such a way I was torn from the warmth of human company. But fear not, my friend. You have imprinted yourself indelibly on the psyche of society. The world will not forget you as I was forgotten. Freeze was distracted by something. Batman followed his gaze to one of the observation ports, but there was nothing to see. Smiling coldly, Freeze turned back to him. Your friend Robin was with us for a while, he said, but he seems to have dropped off. For a moment, Batman's heart sank in his chest. Then he caught a glimpse of a dark, slender figure outside the hole, hanging on to the capsule with the help of magnets on his hands and feet. Slowly but surely, his face showing the terrible strain, Robin was struggling against the acceleration, making his way inch by inch toward the escape hatch. But Freeze couldn't see that from where he was standing, and Batman certainly wasn't about to tell him. Besides, the villain was busy with something else. As Batman looked on, Freeze stepped into the straps of a glide-wing backpack mounted on the wall, and as if he were addressing a university physics class, he went on doggedly with his lecture. At 40,000 feet, the rocket's fuel will be exhausted. This icy tomb will plummet back to Gotham in the form of a fiery missile. Freeze gazed at Batman with something strangely akin to envy. And you will live forever in blessed infamy. Batman scowled. You're insane, Freeze. There are other ways to kill me, if that's what you're after. If this capsule lands in Gotham, it'll slaughter thousands of innocent people. Freeze opened the door behind him, unleashing the fury of the dark and naked sky, the wind whipping at everything in the cabin. Innocent people get hurt all the time, he said with utter objectivity. Freeze well, Batman! And he leaped out into the night.